You walk in tired and hungry, one bad dinner away from losing it. You don't like to cook. You don't want more takeout. You just want something good. That's why there's Dish by Blue Apron. Pre-made meals with at least 20 grams of protein and no artificial flavors or colors. From fridge to fork in 5 minutes or less. Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Howe'er the podcast. Join us in the aftermath of Sunderland's high-octane, all-action, friendly game against Hearts for Craig Gordon's testimonial, the start of his testimonial year up at Tynecastle. You might tell from the slightly ironic tone of voice that the game wasn't the greatest, but we'll get into all of that. And you might also tell from the dulcet tones in your ears that it's not a usual host. You've got Johnny Hawley this time. I've been given the hospital pass of hosting this particular reaction pod, as the other lads are away having much more fun than me. But it's not just me. I've got a man who's becoming a veritable pod regular alongside us to react to the amazing action we just witnessed. So Bomber is the man in question. Welcome, Bomber.
Hello, Johnny. Yeah, I feel like I'm cheating on Gav a little bit. And I was about to call trading standards for your description of the game until until you caveated it with your irony. But yeah, I mean, I always love coming on and talking about Sunderland with you and Gavin and others, but we might struggle this evening.
Yeah, it's not been the most exciting of football matches that you could have watched, particularly if you did actually watch it through the club stream and pay 6 of the finest English pounds to put that into your eyes. And I hope Gav signed a good prenup with you, like, after all this infidelity you're committing. But no, I mean, we'll launch straight into it. So obviously, you know, the game finished 3-0 to Hearts. Not the greatest result, not what you'd be hoping for, but you know, it's still 90 minutes of not competitive football, but certainly of, you know, intense football in a physical sense, because, you know, for all the quality might not have been on show, there was certainly some battles happening across that pitch.
Yeah.
But from the first kind of moment of build-up, you know, the team gets announced an hour before, and it was something of a slight change up from Lebris. You know, he'd previously been picking what was pretty clearly a first-choice 11 for the first half, something that you'd expect to start in the first game against West Ham. But today, not massive changes, but, you know, Dan Neil made an appearance in the midfield 3. Simon Moore was in goal. We've seen Blondie start games in the Algarve. So basically, what did you make of that selection? Do you think it, you know, gives us any particular hints as to the team going forward, or just something to change it up?
I think it was something to change it up. I think for all intents and purposes, Dan Neil had to start today. Otherwise, it would be very, very clear that he is kind of second string. The cynic in me thinks there's a bit of a tactical master plan from Lebris in terms of keeping him involved and not kind of rubber stamping him as, you know, very much second fiddle to the new guys that have come in, and obviously Diarra dropped to the bench in his place. I was pleased to see Huggins out on the left. I can't think of it. And Simon Moore. I mean, he's got to have minutes. If he's going to be second or third choice goalkeeper this season, we can't not play him and then all of a sudden at some point need to call on him. And he's played absolutely 0 minutes. So I'm not surprised there that he's coming for Blondie. I think that was it, wasn't it? Was it just those 3 changes?
Yeah, I think it pretty much was just those 3 changes. Only notable really in the fact that it's the first time that we've seen a change in the policy, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think, you know, you mentioned him there, Huggins playing at left back, obviously partly forced due to Dennis Serkin still, you know, being out injured, and Reinaldo clearly not, I was going to say not fit, but...
Yeah, I was expecting him to see him on the bench, to be honest, but
yeah, possibly just not had enough time around the group, maybe in Lebris' opinion. But Huggins is one, I think, who all of us have been keen to see get, you know, as many minutes under the belt as possible in this pre-season, because, you know, we all know the horrible injury struggles that the lads had over the past few years. Do you think he's been able to stake anything of a claim to that spot in what you've seen from him, or is it still very much Reinaldo's to lose at this stage?
I think so. I think it's still Reinaldo's just off reputation alone at the moment. I think he's probably victim of circumstance a little bit because, it was a physical game and it's his first game back, or first proper game back from, a series of pretty horrific injuries, if we're being perfectly honest. So he was probably looking for something a little bit less physical. And again, he's just one part in a bigger machine, and if that bigger machine isn't performing very well, it's very difficult, particularly for a left back, to stand out. I don't think he was necessarily helped by Adingra being so quiet as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone outside of Lebrise's perceived best 11 really made a claim for a starting place against West Ham. Even so, Dan Neil, I thought he kind of characterised the team performance. Really, I felt he was quite negative. We saw once again that kind of sideways and backwards passing from him. But yeah, to answer your question, go back to your question specifically about Huggins. It was good to see him get some minutes. It was good to see him not have to go off injured. But we're going to need to see more of him before we have any idea where he is in that left back or either full back pecking order. And my gut feeling it's going to be relatively low down at the minute, but I'm rooting for him. I am rooting for him because he deserves a fair shot.
Yeah, I think we all obviously just want to see him fit and happy and playing football again first and foremost. You can worry about the squad selections further down the line. As much as I don't really want to, we should probably talk about the actual football a bit. And Huggins is a name who was involved in the lead up to the first Hearts goal. Something of a bit of sloppy play, I think, particularly from Simon Moore. I think played the ball out to him, didn't really give him much of a chance to do anything with it, and then obviously give the ball away and a ball's flashed in across the box. I think it's Seal to just gets a little bit of a flick to it with the head, but drops straight for Braga at the back post who at that point it's basically a tap-in, isn't it? And I think for me, you talked a little bit about Dan Neil summing up the performance for the first half, and I think that goal basically summed up our performance over the 90 minutes.
Yeah.
The problems were basically of our own making. We didn't really make Hearts work too much for the goal either. There wasn't too much in the way of, positional solidity or anything at the back. There were a lot of gaps, I thought, right throughout the game that they were able to exploit, and we just kind of let it happen. And obviously, the result doesn't make a blind bit of difference in the end. It's a pre-season friendly, but do you get worried when you see us giving away goals quite as poor as that seem to come from us rather than from the opposition?
I think if we were a little bit later in pre-season, it would definitely be something that would be worrying. At this stage, I'm not too worried. There's a number of mitigating factors for me for this game, if I can speak about it more generally rather than about specific incidents. And I think when you and Gav spoke about it on the preview pod, I mentioned that it's something that I didn't want to see, and it turned out to be the reality. And I think you've got this awful cocktail of it being a testimonial match, it being Hearts' last friendly before they launch into some more competitive action. You've got it. I think you've got a little bit of a post-holiday blues atmosphere within the team. It's all very well new signings coming in Portugal and living the life. Not that footballers don't live the life anyway, but in particular on like away pre-season trips. It's very much like they work hard, but it's very much like a lad's holiday abroad. And the cold reality of coming back to, albeit a mild Scotland, and having to play a physical game against Hearts, is probably a bit of a come down as well, I think. So, like I say, it's just some awful weird cocktail that's just resulted in this wet fart of a performance, really.
Yeah, it's probably the fairest way of summing it up, really, which tells you everything about the game. I mean, but I think you're right, though, as well, because even from the first minute, obviously it's Craig Gordon's testimonial, so he deserves to be sent to stage, but the peculiar situation with him actually being too injured to play in his own testimonial match meant that obviously he leads them out, the game starts, and then immediately Gordon just boots it straight out of play and gets subbed off.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that sets the tone for a,
I think it does.
Well, I mean, it set the tone in the sense that it summed up the game a bit, but I don't know how much that gets you ready for a sort of blood and thunder rip roar in 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It, like you say, it kind of sets that pace, and that actually, we're here for this guy. There's not going to be another game in this season or the next or for the next 5 seasons where they're going to be involved in something that somebody comes out, everyone makes a bit of a fanfare about them, and then they kick it out play and come off clapping. So yeah, it probably does take from our point of view anyway, the competitive edge out of it a little bit. I think it's not an excuse because it was still poor. And we had plenty of opportunity. That was still the first minute. We had opportunity to grow into the game. Lebreeze would have had a chance to talk to players at half time, and we didn't really see much different. But it would have set a tone of sorts, I think, definitely.
Yeah, and to be fair as well, we're sounding a little bit woe Sunderland there, but you're right. It's the same pitch and the same game and the same occasion for both teams. And look, admittedly, they're a little bit further along in their pre-season preparations than we are. But Hearts certainly didn't struggle to impose themselves on the game. I mean, to the point where there were some quite tasty challenges flying in. I thought, Siddiqui went down and had to go off in the first half and then rolled back on in the second. I remember Habib Diarra wore quite a strong challenge, which admittedly a fair tackle, the kind of thing that you'd want to see in the season, but not what you're accustomed to from this sort of game. Again, I mean, I don't want to sound too negative, so not are you worried about it, but how much do you read into those discrepancies in fitness and in intensity between the two teams today?
Well, I think I'll revert back to what I said before. I think it's too early in pre-season to really read too much into anything. And like I said, when you take all that kind of mitigation with it as well, I understand fans. I think myself, I'm sure you included, and fans who are listening to this will be disappointed given the level of performance that we saw out in the Algarve, in particular that first half against Sporting, and then to go from that to away at Hearts, where I think a lot of fans are probably thinking, if we're up for this and we play like we do against Lisbon, we could put 3 or 4 past these. And everyone's talking about Mayenda needing to score a goal and how it would be good for the new boys to settle in and maybe get a couple of goals or an assist for themselves. And it's actually been the polar opposite. So as we sit here, 10, 15 minutes after the final whistle, it feels a little bit like the end of last season, as in the actual league campaign, where we're a little bit disappointed, lacking any sort of kind of cutting edge. That was the one thing that I would take away, is that for all the attacking talent we had on display, I guess Isidore excluded in that because he wasn't in the squad. Same with Rig, I guess. But we created next to nothing. I think Adingra had one, he flashed across, and then right at the end, Roberts flashed one across the box as well. Other than that, and the Lafay free kick. Other than that, we didn't really create anything, and we didn't really ever look like scoring, which was the most disappointing thing over the result and the more general performance, I think. Yeah,
I mean, I heard the Hearts stream commentators at the end saying that Craig Gordon actually could have stayed on and played the whole game because he had nothing to do anyway. I think that is a good point to make, though. And I've kind of been banging this drum through pre-season, is that you forget, because of how obviously the euphoria of promotion, we're all high on all of our players, and Mayenda, we're all saying that he's going to be one of the best strikers in Europe one day and what have you, getting a bit excited. But for all that we've spent a lot of money on the new arrivals and everything, they haven't played much football together.
No.
And certainly not even somebody like Lafay, who was here for the second half of last season. He is now finally being given a proper run in his proper position. Whereas obviously he was shunted out to the left wing so often last season to cover for particularly Mundell's injuries. It's gonna have to come with time, isn't it? A game like today, I think, is emblematic of that. Like you say, there was very little going forward in terms of penetration, and not just making the keeper work, but even making the back four work. We weren't really stretching them or playing those kind of, really teasing balls. So that's something that they'll certainly want to work on. But now that they're back at the stadium, now they're back at the Academy of Light, and it's kind of, back to your day-to-day preparations.
I'm still confident that will come. You know, one 90-minute performance in a testimonial in Scotland isn't going to change my mindset on that. But one thing it kind of has done, and again, I alluded to it in the preview that we did, that the good feeling it has thus far carried through right from that Dan Ballard header against Coventry. And we feel like we've been on this, 2-3 month party with new signings and new kits and everything else. And one thing that I didn't really want to happen today was for that to have been dampened somewhat. And it feels like, from a fan perspective anyway, it feels like it possibly has.
Yeah.
And it feels like a bit of a reality bump when actually my reaction to it will be in hindsight once we've seen the whole game and once we've seen some of the others leading up to those final two against Augsburg and someone else who I've forgotten. Those last two games that we've got on like back to back. I can't remember the last pre-season, but yeah, like I said, I'm still buzzing for the season. I think what the club could do with doing is maybe announcing a few signings between now and next Saturday, just to get that little bit of buzz back. But I don't think the players won't be affected by it. I'm certain of that. The other thing, Johnny, we were talking about setting tones, etc. When a player comes off after 30 minutes and then runs back on with 20 minutes to go, kind of tells you all you need to know in terms of the attitude towards the game. Yeah. And if that was planned, if it was always planned for Siddiqui to come off after 30 and then come back on, then that kind of gives you an idea of how the team and how Lebris was treating this game as well. If it wasn't, and it was genuinely kind of injury concerns, and we just took advantage of those rules, that's one thing. But if it was planned, then yeah, it speaks volumes, really.
Yeah, and that is, you must be psychoactively communicating with us, because that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to talk about next, which is, so obviously that was a poor result. It's a poor game. I'm not going to go through all the goals because I don't want to. I can't. They
were all pretty much the same anyway. We gave the ball away, we messed up,
and they tapped it in.
Yeah, that was the other thing. They didn't really, not to ruin your segue, but they didn't really carve us open at any point. It was all our own doing. But.
Yeah, it was a low quality game in front of goal from both sides. I think it's fair to say. But you were mentioning the substitutions and kind of that activity off the bench, which we then saw in the second half. So again, a bit of a change from what we have seen, where it's been very much team starts at half time, everyone changes, and that's what you see for the second half. We actually made wholesale changes a bit later in the game this time. It was towards that 70th minute mark.
Yeah.
Which was interesting more in the sense that we've got another pre-season friendly coming up in a few days against Hull at the MKM. So there's obviously going to be some travel involved. Obviously, they've got to get back down from Edinburgh. They'll have however long they've got at home, and then they'll be travelling down to Hull for that game in a few days. So shortish turnaround. So you'd expect to see probably quite a few changes to that starting team for Tuesday night's game. And that's why it's interesting, I think, to look at the team selections, because could that give us a clue as to who's going to be playing from the start this time? And then looking at the players who will be available to come on from the bench, I think, this is, again, not to just rehash the preview pod, but I was kind of saying in the preview, I think we'll see the players who are more likely to be involved on the first day of the league season stepping up the number of minutes they're playing and playing more 60s and 70s rather than 45s. So with that in mind, obviously, we don't know what's going to happen necessarily with the players who missed out through injury. So Isidore, Chris Rigg and Anthony Patterson being the top three that come to your mind there. But
Sirkin.
And obviously Sirkin as well, who's been out long-term since, I think he had surgery, didn't he, over the summer?
Pretty much a couple of days after the playoff final, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so looking ahead a little bit to that whole game then, do you expect to see wholesale changes in the team? And if you do, who are you most expecting to be involved from the start and kind of get those most minutes to step up?
Yeah. So I do expect it to be changed. I almost expect that the players that came on this afternoon and got those 20 minutes, I expect the majority of those will possibly start, because a lot of those, I guess, particularly some of the younger lads, will be judged based on EFL opposition rather than SPL or La Liga opposition. So I do expect it to be more of a run out for them. And if at all, if there's any possibility of us getting Chris Rigg on some minutes, Anthony Patterson some minutes, Wilson Isidore some minutes. I think that will be an opportunity to do it rather than throwing them in against the likes of Betis, etc. I don't think we'll see many starters from today's match starting the match at Hull. I think this will be almost like a last opportunity maybe for some of those on the fringes to not necessarily make a claim to start on the 16th of August against West Ham, but to stay at the club for the season and make a contribution to the season rather than going out on loan or be resigned to the under-21s for the season. I think this whole game will be some of the last chances to impress in that respect. And then we'll go into next Saturday against Betis, and we'll see, I think, pretty much injury permitting, we'll probably see something as close to what we will see on opening day. I think that's the approach I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I struggle to disagree, and I hope you're right as well because I'm going up for the Betis game, so I want to see a full strength team. I want to see a full strength team and a bit of sun.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think it's a good point as well that you just made. So last thing that I want to touch on really is you talk about those sort of fringe players who may or may not stay at the club this season, being a bit of a last chance saloon. I'm thinking of, we've talked about Huggins already. Even somebody like Jensen Seelt, he's looked decent in pre-season, but obviously you can't read loads into the performances. Another who's had obviously injury problems. I think Abdullahi as well, who came on for that last sort of 15, 20 minutes up front. Those are the names who I would expect to be seeing, not necessarily play the majority of the game, because I don't know if Huggins is going to be able to have 70 minutes that close together.
Yeah.
But they're the ones I think that you'd really want to see performances from, to fill you with a bit more confidence in them going into the season. So, fingers crossed we see something a little bit better on Tuesday than what we saw today, because it's going to be another dry post-match pod if we see the same thing.
I might hold judgment on or hold my availability to react to that one.
Next time the rallying cry goes out in the WhatsApp group, it might just be a few minutes later.
Sorry, Gav, I'm not gonna be able to watch it, unfortunately.
No, but it's as we've said a few times, it is only pre-season, so the results don't mean much in the grand scheme of things, and it is still more minutes under players' belts. And barring a little scare with Siddiqui, we haven't picked up any injuries.
No.
So, I think we can still at least take a couple of positives out of that game, and hopefully things improve. Looking up for
positives.
Yeah. I'm grasping very firmly at the straws here.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we're all in a better mood after the game on Tuesday night. So I think that pretty much wraps it up for the post-match reaction there. I think we've done pretty bloody well to get to 22 and a half minutes there.
Yeah.
So all that remains is for me to say thank you very much, Bomber, for joining us for that.
Thank you, mate. Pleasure as always.
And to plug How We're the Podcast, as we have to do at the end of every one of these. So obviously, if you've been keeping up with us at all, you'll know that we've been releasing daily podcasts, sometimes twice daily, because there's just so much to keep up with in the world of Sunderland AFC. Don't forget to read Bomber's Transfer Tuesday updates on the site at rokerreport.sbnation.com. And all the other brilliant content that we bring you there from Roker Report. Podcast-wise, we'll have an on this week on Monday morning, I think, as well as plenty of other stuff to keep you busy and whet the appetites over the coming days and weeks as we build up to the first Premier League season since 2016-17. Thank you very much for listening, and see you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.